I'll go for. I think I'll go for seniority. I call the Honourable Mary Ann Street.
That's right, age before beauty again. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I rise to join this debate in the committee stages of this bill because there is a need to do so. I wish I didn't have to, but I do. Mr. Chair, I want to talk particularly about the regulatory impact statement, which numbers of colleagues have traversed already. But I want to talk about it from a slightly different point of view, and I want to talk also about the report of the Attorney-General. Mr. Chairman, in the course of drafting legislation, regulatory impact statements are made, and the advice that has gone to ministers is put out. And the justification for the choice the minister has made is displayed. Or that is normally the case. That is normally the case. So we have here in the regulatory impact statement the comparisons between the options that were available to the minister on advice from officials. And there were 9 options. There was a matrix of 3 different options with 3 possibilities within each of those. And the option that the minister has chosen was the medium targeting one, which would pay family carers in high and very high need situations. And he's chosen the third of the options in that stream, which we're advised would cost between $70 and $30 million. $70 and $30 million. Another option that he could have chosen was option C, which is no targeting, pay everybody, all family carers, providing ministry contracted home support services. Mr. Speaker, the third option in that stream would have cost a maximum of $46 million. So we have a difference between the 2 better options of $16 million. $16 million could have taken the scope of people being covered from 1,600 disabled persons whose families would be paid to support them to 5,400, everybody. And yet the minister has chosen to take the lesser of those options for the sake of $16 million. $16 million is fairly comparable to the amount of money the government took out of adult and community education some years ago and did enormous damage to a whole network across the country of adult education learning opportunities. Mr. Chairman, the government has cut a third out of the environment portfolio appropriations, 34% out of that portfolio. It's giving $80 million as a subsidy to farmers for irrigation, and yet it cannot find $16 million to do the best option for the most people. The best option for the most people. And so, looking at this, and I think to myself, if I were a minister, and I was, briefly, but if I look at this through a minister's eyes, I would want to go through these recommended options and say, okay, where are the risks? What are the risks in here around these options, and why would I not go for the best option for the greatest number? And so I'd look for advice from officials about the significant risks. And so I go through the paper and I come to the bit that says significant legal risks, significant legal issues and risks arising from the preferred response. It's got a heading here, significant legal issues and risks arising from the preferred response. And ministers must always be mindful of the risks, must always be able to defend why they have taken a particular policy option and what the upsides and downsides of that policy option are. And so I go straight to that, like a homing pigeon, having been a minister. What are the risks here, and what do I find? Here's the headline here, Mr. Chairman, And here's the answer. It's all blacked out. So I go over the page and I want to know some more about the legal risks. And here is the page. Everything is blacked out. So here we go. How am I to know, as a responsible member of Parliament, Mr. Chairman?
The Honourable Mary Ann Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How am I meant to know, as a responsible member of Parliament, and on what basis has the Minister made a responsible decision if this is what we get in the way of consideration of significant legal issues and risks pertaining to the best option? Mr. Chairman, this is not good enough. And the Minister can sit there knowing that he just has to endure this period of time in the House. He just has to get through it, and if he sits there quietly, and if none of the national members get up to defend it, he knows that the time will pass, because all of this is time limited, the time will pass, and he will get his way in the end. So he'll sit here and think, I hope everybody who has an interest in this is at work or not watching Parliament on TV, because otherwise I might have to get up and answer some questions. But the truth of the matter is, Mr. Chairman, that is not good enough, and that is no basis on which this Parliament ought to be assessing the proper risks and legal issues around this. But let me touch further on the legal issues, because the Attorney-General has written a report and points out the fact that this bill inserts a new 70E into the Act, which prevents a person from making a complaint to the Human Rights Commission or commencing proceedings at the Human Rights Review Tribunal. It prevents the Human Rights Commission also from taking any further action in relation to a complaint made after the 16th of May. What is the date on the wall today? Because we're in urgency, most of the rest of the world thinks it's the 17th of May, but in this place, it is the 16th of May. And this is the first occasion when people have been advised that if they didn't get a complaint in before today, they weren't going to be able to go to the Human Rights Commission. Mr. Chairman, at the end of this report from the Attorney-General, he says the new 70E appears to limit the right to judicial review because it would prevent a person from challenging the lawfulness of a decision on the basis that it was inconsistent with the Bill of Rights Act. On balance, he says, and I quote, on balance, I have concluded that that limitation cannot be justified under Section 5 of the Bill of Rights Act. It cannot be justified. Why do we not have the Minister getting up and saying, I understand what the Attorney-General has said, but I reckon on these grounds Parliament should take that into consideration but proceed in this way? We're getting no response from the Minister because he just wants to sit here and wait for the time to elapse for this to get out of his hair and for us to all sit down. But it does require some response, Mr. Chairman. And not only is the blanking out of sections of the regulatory impact statement not good enough, but not responding and not saying to this House why it should not take into account the point that the Attorney-General has made, which is that it is an infringement of human rights in New Zealand if we proceed with this legislation the way it is. Why do we not hear from him justifying why we should proceed with this legislation? Mr. Chairman, Labor would like to vote for this. We would like to support it because we believe that people do deserve to be paid for caring for disabled family members. This is otherwise healthcare on the cheap, and that, I have to say, that is a feature of this government also. They want conservation on the cheap by devolving it to volunteer groups. They want housing on the cheap by devolving it to the third sector. And they've wanted and enjoyed health care on the cheap by limiting the amount that they pay family members and then making people pay for it, as my colleague says. Mr Chairman, this is not good enough. It should have gone to a select committee. There is no need for it to be an urgency. It raises too many points that need to be thoroughly debated and submitted on by the public of New Zealand. Mr Chairman, this is not good enough. It is the way this minister works, simply to wield power and push his will through, but it is not good enough.
Mr Chair.
I call the honourable member Ian